Let's get this done before I forget like Slipknot. No, seriously. I will remember this movie in 10 minutes. So here are my immediate thoughts on Imaginary. Imaginary is the new Blumhouse horror film directed by Jeff Wadlow and starring DeWanda Wise as Jessica, a newly married woman who moves back into her childhood home with her family. Her youngest stepdaughter, Alice, played by Pyper Braun, finds a stuffed bear named Chauncey. As Alice's behavior becomes more and more concerning, Jessica intervenes only to realize that Chauncey is much more than the stuffed toy bear she believed him to be. So first off, this movie takes place on Elm Street. And right there, I should have known what I was getting into. And I'm going to keep it real with you guys. After watching that first trailer, I did not have a lot of confidence going into this movie. And I don't know what is happening with Blumhouse lately. I know Five Nights at Freddy's was a hit, but that was a chore for me to get through. And Night Swim was absolutely ridiculous. And it seems like Blumhouse is continuing their trend here. Okay, so let's get right into it. Is Imaginary scary? No, not at all. In fact, it's pretty boring. Except for the times where it rips off Poltergeist and, again, A Nightmare on Elm Street. The film is PG-13, so there is no gore. And I can count on one hand how many people die in this movie. And there's nothing really that exciting to talk about or anything really that scary at all. I guess except for the existence of this film in the first place, which seems to be like opening Pandora's box. DeWanda Wise does the best she can playing Jessica, who really isn't the smartest character in this movie. She makes a lot of dumb and weird decisions that you would expect characters in horror movies of this caliber to make. She has a weird relationship with her father that has to do with some sort of childhood trauma, but it is so confusing and muddled that honestly it is hard to get behind her. Speaking of muddled, the lore for this movie is just confusing. So Alice goes downstairs to the basement of this house and finds basically Lucio Fulci's doorway to hell from the beyond, and behind there she finds Chauncey the teddy bear. And when I think of that name, I think of Chauncey Gardner, the person that Peter Sellers played in Being There. And I wish I was watching Being There. So Chauncey is this imaginary friend that interacts with Alice, and it's one of those things where as soon as Alice finds Chauncey, immediately her entire demeanor changes. When the film starts, Alice is really receptive to her stepmother, but then suddenly she just turns with no explanation. I would be like, okay, fine movie, if that's the way you want to go. But then there's a character that is introduced at the end of the second act, and I'm like, wait, why wasn't this character introduced earlier? And that was my experience with a lot of this movie. Asking questions that I am just never going to get answers for. This is a typical Blumhouse horror film. There were 17 jump scares in all in the entire movie. I made sure to count. There is actually one point where there are 3 jump scares that happen in a row. And I'm just like, what the fuck is happening here? This whole movie hinges on 2 things. One, that one character's childhood trauma is so devastating that even when she moves back into her childhood home, where there are clues of said childhood trauma drawn all over the walls, nothing comes to her. She has conversations with her father, who gives her all sorts of clues that he babbles out, and she is just too stupid to decipher any of it. The other thing Imaginary hinges on is the performance by Pyper Braun as Alice, and I have to say, she's fucking amazing. There's one scene where she has to go through a gamut of emotions and basically lose her goddamn mind, and I absolutely believed her, and this was the one and only time that I was sucked into this movie. So, Pyper Braun, you have some talent, and I will be watching your career. I wish nothing of the best for you. She was absolutely great. The other stepdaughter, played by Taegen Burns, was a bitch. It's not the actor's fault, that's just the way she was written. And I cannot stand precocious teenagers. That is just a tired trope that is just something I am completely over. Another trope that I'm over is when someone is in a horror movie and something absolutely crazy and unexplainable happens to a character, and instead of fessing up to it and saying something, they just basically disappear from the movie and you never hear from them again. Like Tom Payne, who plays the husband, who just kind of bounces at the middle of the second act. We have one kooky character that really exists only to provide exposition, and when she does, man, it is confusing as hell. Imaginary tries to create this own lore about imaginary friends that tether themselves to children when they're younger, but when that connection is severed in a very quick way, then that entity can become evil and malevolent. This is the plot of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. God damn. I am in pain. Overall, in Imaginary, especially the last act, it felt like every 5 minutes or so, there was new lore introduced and new roots to this universe. And a lot of it didn't make a whole lot of sense once I sat down and really thought about it. This movie tried way too hard to have his cake and eat it too by trying to play into a psychological horror about childhood trauma, but it also wanted to be a jump scare popcorn flick, and it failed at both. It was poorly directed, some of the lines the actors had to deliver were god-awful, and this movie was just confusing and not scary at all. Pyper Braun brought it, but that is the only thing about this movie I even remotely halfway enjoyed. Other than that, fuck this movie. This is a bomb. Man, 2024 has been a hard year for movies so far. When is Dune Messiah coming out? What did you think of Imaginary? Share your thoughts, leave your comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can get notifications as well. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.